Tonight, we're here in St. John's, the city slowly coming back to life after that monster of a blizzard. Packed parking lots, hours in line for groceries, and yet...
It's nice we met new friends.
Call it the anti-Black Friday, but the roads are another story.
Also tonight, a potentially deadly SARS-like virus spreads to North America.
We have to be prepared for the worst.
Why airport screenings may not stop an outbreak. Harry and Meghan warn the paparazzi back off, and the locals on Vancouver Island agree.
Do you think a guy like you does anything for this community?
And Harvey Weinstein stands trial tomorrow.
The witnesses are going to be put through hell.
One of his first accusers has a message for the jury. This is The National.
In St. John's right now, the snow is an overwhelming force. Everywhere you look, there are towers of it, trucks full of it, people trying to navigate it. This is day 5 of the city's state of emergency after the blizzard, and there will be a day 6. We're here in downtown St. John's, which, as you can see, is still pretty much shut down. But earlier, right across the city, there was one big focus: food. For the first time since Saturday, grocery stores were allowed to open. Outside, hundreds of people lined up. Inside, it was gridlock. In other neighborhoods, the cavalry is still coming to the rescue. Members of the military with shovels and energy on offer for those running out of both. And while the state of emergency will stay in effect, tomorrow some big steps towards opening up. Crucially, commercial flights will be allowed to take off and land at the St. John's Airport. So you've heard the saying, pack your patience. Well, as Kayla Hounsell shows us, that was absolutely necessary for anyone heading out to shop today.
They sat in their cars, waiting and wondering.
I'm just hoping that everybody is going to remember that we're all in need and not try to trample anybody going in.
I'm hoping for some, everybody to keep a level head and stuff, not really go kind of full Black Friday.
Before long, a lineup wrapped around the building. After 4 days of not being able to shop, some were getting desperate. Many were running out of food. And when the doors opened, no one stopped to chat.
Oh, it's best gone. Sorry, we gotta go.
There was no stampede, but just look at this. And there were scenes just like it all over the city. Most people looking for the basics.
You know, just bread, a dozen eggs, and a bit of bacon, and some good old bologna.
We're gonna have to stop you guys there.
Even when the doors were closed again to limit the number of people inside, there was no frustration, no anger.
It's nice we met new friends.
Oh, I guess everybody is in the same boat, so they're just patient with everybody, and everybody wants to be out helping and just help everybody get through it.
This local grocery store says for the most part the company has enough supplies on the island. The challenge under the ongoing state of emergency has been getting permission to get them into St. John's from warehouses in other parts of the province.
I know for sure milk is going to be an issue. Right now we still have milk in stock and we're working with our suppliers right now. I think we'll be okay, but I'm hearing from our grocers across the island that is a problem.
And imagine this. Taxi drivers given permission to operate today volunteered their time to drive people to grocery stores for free.
Why wouldn't I?
Paul Hillier says that's just the way it is here.
We're Newfoundlanders. How's that? That's all I can say. Newfoundlanders. Here to help, is it?
Yet another sign of the Newfoundland spirit on display during a time that is so difficult for so many.
And so, Kayla, that state of emergency, as I understand it, will still be in effect tomorrow, but there are more exceptions, right?
Yeah, that's right. Things are being relaxed a bit, so we'll see those stores and pharmacies open again tomorrow between the hours of 10 and 6. We mentioned the airport will be open. That's a big one. Taxis will be back on the road for full service, and people are allowed to drive to and from these places that will be open. But still, the city is urging if people do not have to go out, don't.
Okay, so very briefly, Canada Post also hasn't been able to get mail in or off the island basically since last Thursday. What's the plan now?
Right, that's because the airport has been closed, and Canada Post says it will not begin moving things around until that state of emergency has been lifted. As for delivery, that's not happening either. Here in St. John's, Canada Post says they won't resume delivery until next week, Adrian.
Wow, all right, Kayla, thanks very much. So as we mentioned, there are hundreds of military personnel in the area tonight who have been helping dig people out of all this snow. Chris O'Neill-Yates takes us inside their operation today.
City streets are an obstacle course.
The roads are still narrow. There's still quite a bit of snow cover on them.
The steep stairs in hilly St. John's can also be quite a challenge. But one shovelful at a time, the military is clearing the way.
Last time we had one that was up over the window on the front door, so it was really interesting to try and get them out.
The Canadian Forces has been compiling a list of people who need help. The Royal Newfoundland Regiment is helping to tackle it. Of the roughly 400 military personnel on the ground right now, half are local reservists.
They seem to be quite happy. Basically, Newfoundlanders helping Newfoundlanders. It's a good thing.
This man from Iraq never saw so much snow before. He was thrilled with the military who cleared his entire driveway.
Beautiful, beautiful. Guys, it's good.
So just grab everybody out of this vehicle, just get rid of this quickly, and we'll move on to the next one.
Next up, an elderly couple trying to get their car out. Many hands made light work here. Joan Vey is thankful to finally get out after being housebound for 5 days.
I think this is wonderful. There's nothing like the military men.
Bernadette Cole was so impressed when she looked out and saw them digging out a senior on her street. She wanted to pay it forward.
What they're doing for people, it's heartbreaking when you look at it. Sorry, I'm an emotional person. But I just want to do my part in offering them some water.
The reward for these personnel, the reaction of the people they're helping.
Just like very grateful. Last night a little kid came out and helped us, so it's nice. It gets everyone involved, and it's just nice to help out the neighborhood.
The next neighborhood is her own, Bell Island. Another sign of just how personal this mission is for so many. Chris O'Neill-Yates, CBC News, St. John's.
And another update on the storm. Tonight, the RCMP are suspending their search for a man who went missing in the blizzard about an hour west of St. John's. 26-year-old Josh Wald tried to walk to a friend's house in the middle of the storm. He later sent a text message saying he was lost and that his cell phone was losing power. Despite days of searching, police say he has not been found, so the search is now on pause until they say there's new information or considerable snowmelt. I'll be back from St. John's a little later for tonight's moment, but for now, back to Toronto and Andrew.
All right, Adrian. A strain of coronavirus capturing headlines around the world is now much closer to Canada. U.S. officials confirmed North America's first case near Seattle today.
I'm thankful that the man who tested positive for this virus acted so quickly and sought treatment. His actions gave us a head start. And because of that, we were able to isolate him away from the public.
The infected patient, who is doing well, had recently returned from Wuhan, China. That's where the virus first broke out 3 weeks ago, before spreading to other cities, Beijing, Shanghai, Shenzhen, then neighboring countries, Thailand, Japan, South Korea, and now the United States. So far, the virus has killed at least 9 people and infected at least 440 others. Now, Canadian health officials are watching and preparing. Don't forget, this coronavirus is genetically similar to the SARS virus in the early 2000s that killed nearly 800 people, infecting just over 8,000. And beyond China, Canada was one of the hardest hit countries in the world. So, Christine Birak takes a closer look at our early defenses.
Canadian officials think they're ready. Electronic warning signs in airports and additional health questions at kiosks are coming, but some worry that won't be enough.
Viruses do not carry passports. They don't respect national borders.
Some countries are using thermal scanners right on board outgoing and incoming flights from China. The U.S. will soon be checking for sick passengers at 5 major airports. But Canada has no plans to do temperature screenings, and experts say they don't work.
The challenge with them is that not everyone who has a high temperature is going to have this novel coronavirus. In fact, only a very small percentage would.
During SARS, a pilot project tested thermal scanners in Toronto and Vancouver. Over 2 million passengers were scanned. More than 800 were sent for additional screening by nurses or quarantine officers. None were found to have SARS. The first American patient wouldn't have been picked up by these scanners either. Health officials say he didn't have a fever when he landed in Seattle.
If we actually zoom into this area over here,
It's estimated Canada will see 4,000 travelers from Wuhan by April. Infectious disease experts say the real front line in this outbreak will be hospitals.
frontline healthcare workers are aware, have all the appropriate, personal protective equipment in place, so they can isolate people and prevent one case from becoming 10 or 100 cases.
Like airports, hospital emergency rooms will begin posting warning signs. Healthcare workers are being briefed on symptoms and reinforcing the need to wear gowns, gloves, and masks. Canada's top doctor is confident.
So we're prepared. In some ways, regardless of what the outcome is of the emergency committee.
That committee is with the World Health Organization. Tomorrow, it will decide if this outbreak is a public health emergency. Christine Burak, CBC News, Toronto.
And so while we wait for that decision from the World Health Organization, how concerned should we really be? What exactly is this virus? How contagious is it? And could Canadians already be infected? We put those questions to our panel of doctors a little later on The National. Okay, Donald Trump's impeachment trial began today in the U.S. Senate over abuse of power and obstruction of Congress. And as Susan Ormiston tells us, before a single argument or witness is heard, the gloves are already off and the partisan punches are flying.
Trump pants out now! Trump pants out now!
Outside the Capitol and inside a fight over rules, Republican rules, which will shape this trial.
The McConnell rules seem to be designed by President Trump for President Trump.
Democrats called foul, especially as one after another amendments for new documents to be submitted were voted down today.
If the president's case is so weak that none of the president's men can defend him under oath, shame on him.
Over the next few weeks, senators will be stuck in their seats with no cell phones all day as each legal team presents their case 3 days each.
Finally, some fairness.
Mitch McConnell's goal as Senate Majority Leader is to push through this trial as quickly as possible, leaving less time for twists or presidential tweets. In fact, President Trump was in Davos, not D.C., but still dogged by questions on the world stage about impeachment.
It's the witch hunt that's been going on for years.
In the overall sweep of history in the United States, I think that this impeachment is very important in terms of showing how we care about our Constitution.
James Thurber at American University says regardless of the outcome, this is still a critical test of presidential power.
This process in the Senate is not a real trial. This is basically a trial before the American people. It's a public relations trial before the American people.
The Trump team is still confident this trial is an aggravation, but won't result in removal of this president. New witnesses could change that calculation, and even though that is blocked for now, another vote on evidence and witnesses will come later in the trial. Susan Ormiston, CBC News, Washington.
A CSIS employee alleges he was constantly bullied and abused by coworkers because he is Muslim. And we can't identify him because of the Security of Information Act, so we've disguised his voice. But in this exclusive interview with Jonathan Gatehouse, he describes the incidents that led to his lawsuit.
I don't think there is anybody in terms of the class of employees lower than a practicing Muslim.
Samir, not his real name, was actively recruited by CSIS back in the early 2000s. They knew his strong language skills and familiarity with the Middle East would be valuable.
CSIS collects and analyzes information to warn our government about possible threats to our country.
But after 9/11, Samir says he and his family were put under surveillance and treated with suspicion. He endured the harassment for years, he says. But after he complained to CSIS brass in Ottawa, he claims it only got worse, and that he was even targeted when he would pray in his office.
They start saying stuff, profanities, laughing, bringing other people to look. Suddenly somebody would open the door and pretend that they didn't know that I was there. It would hit me.
Then what he says was the last straw.
One day, I came back from a lunch break. I turned the door handle and I saw it is wet. I looked, somebody spit on my door. Saliva was dripping from the face of the door all the way to the door handle. When I saw that, I thought this is not a place for me anymore because I didn't feel safe.
He's been off on sick leave for 2 years and last week filed suit against CSIS.
I've watched organizations like this for 30 years of practice. You can see organizations try to fix things from the top, and what happens is that attempt to fix problems, to erase discrimination and try to equalize the work environment winds up being undermined by the people in the middle, the central managers that aren't getting the message.
This isn't the first time that CSIS has been accused of discrimination. A similar multi-million-dollar suit filed by 5 minority employees was settled in 2017. The agency says it can't comment on this case, but that it takes the allegations seriously. Jonathan Gatehouse, CBC News, Toronto.
To BC now, where the Duke and Duchess of Sussex are starting their new lives, but they're already off to a rocky start. As Tanya Fletcher explains, the couple is threatening paparazzi that go too far.
For weeks now, international media have been descending on a quiet community on Vancouver Island. The cameras were already clicking as Prince Harry stepped off a WestJet flight in Victoria Monday night. That same day, Meghan was photographed walking Archie and her dogs in a park, reportedly prompting legal warnings to paparazzi.
Lawyers for the couple claim the photos from here were taken without her consent and that the photographer was hiding in the bushes and spying on her.
They also allege photographers have been camped outside the property they've been staying at, using long-range lenses to try to get shots inside the $14 million mansion. Many who live here don't want any part of it. Here, a confrontation between self-described paparazzi and locals.
Do you think a guy like you does anything for this community? Doesn't matter how much money you spend or anything. That's not what this community is about.
Do you think a guy like you does anything for this community?
Oh, he does it. You've no
idea. You have no clue what I do.
Well, it's a worldwide story. This is the biggest story in the world. How often does someone quit the royal family?
A local water taxi operator even refused to charter his boat to paparazzi, offering $150 an hour to get waterfront shots.
Hard to turn down a business, but most importantly, it's I have to live with myself.
Yet in the UK, there's little surprise the spotlight has followed them.
It was clear that this was going to happen, and now, of course, it's up to the Canadian courts to provide the protection that the royal couple need.
But it's largely uncharted territory for a country not used to a paparazzi culture.
It's not something that's really been tested a whole lot in Canada, but I would expect that an injunction, so a court order requiring the paparazzi to stay away, might be something that they would seek as well.
For now, it's the community that's defending the young family's right to a private life.
Locally, I'd say we're protective, not intrusive, let them live their life.
Tanya Fletcher, CBC News, Victoria.
Now, bodyguards are trailing Harry and Meghan everywhere they go, but Ottawa says Canadians are not footing the bill, at least not yet.
I have not spoken to Her Majesty directly. Discussions continue to be ongoing, and I have no updates at this moment.
Now, the way it works, normally the couple would be considered internationally protected persons, meaning Canada would have to provide some level of security for them. But now that Harry and Meghan have renounced their royal titles, Canada's public safety minister says that status is in question. Well, tomorrow marks the beginning of a court case watched around the world, Harvey Weinstein's criminal trial. We speak to one of the first to accuse the Hollywood mogul of rape.
This event will be the trigger of nightmares.
Rose McGowan and what she wants the jury to know next. Plus, the bizarre story behind protesters outside the Meng Wanzhou hearings.
He's told me very basic information and that I would get $100 for those 2 hours.
And how the cost just keeps going up for kids dreaming of a future in the NHL.
I think parents need to take a step back, and how much is too much?
We're back in 2 minutes. Harvey Weinstein's sexual assault trial will begin tomorrow. The charges are based on the allegations of just 2 women, but in all, more than 80 have come forward. One of them is actor Rose McGowan. Today, she told the CBC's Stevens D'Souza what this trial means for her and the Me Too movement.
This event will be the trigger of nightmares.
Rose McGowan is one of Harvey Weinstein's most vocal accusers, but on the eve of opening arguments, she says she's going to try and shut out what comes next, because even the sight of the former mogul is traumatizing.
I start feeling like hot all over and tears come to my eyes. And then it passes, it passes. You just have to hold on to that thing passes.
McGowan alleges Weinstein raped her at the Sundance Film Festival in 1997. Like dozens of other accusers, her allegations aren't on trial here. She's a prominent figure in the Me Too movement, a conversation about sexual assault that she hopes will continue no matter what happens in court.
It kind of means so much, but also it can't mean everything, because in case it doesn't go, the way that I hope for, and I think that many are hoping for, the movement will still carry on.
Weinstein has pleaded not guilty to charges of rape and predatory sexual assault. His defense team says they'll show dozens of emails the accuser sent after the alleged assault that were loving and flirtatious. But experts say the defense is relying on outdated myths, that it's not unusual for victims to maintain contact, sometimes to try and regain control, in other cases, out of fear of personal and professional repercussions. McGowan says she's worried the jury of 7 men and 5 women won't see through the defense strategy.
I hope it doesn't play, in that courtroom. It's so ugly, and it's so wrong, and it's just taking every kind of not evolved thought and throwing it on these women.
Asked how she would deliver an opening argument, McGowan offered this.
Do not let power sway you. Do not let power buy you, because power is what's on trial here.
A power she and other accusers hope the trial will help them reclaim. Stephen D'Souza, CBC News, New York.
Now to some other stories making news across the country tonight. We are learning more about the protesters who showed up outside the extradition trial of Huawei CFO Meng Wanzhou yesterday.
He's told me very basic information about needing 30 people for Monday from 8:30 to 10:30 a.m. and that I would get $100 for those 2 hours.
At least 2 people have now come forward to CBC News saying they were not only paid to be at yesterday's protest, but were also recruited under false pretenses. One saying she thought the job was to be an extra for a movie shoot. The individuals say they have no idea who was responsible for organizing the protesters or for paying them. The remains of one of the Canadian victims from the downed Ukrainian airliner have been brought back to Canada. The federal government says Iran has so far respected the family's wishes regarding burial, but they are closely monitoring reports that families trying to repatriate remains of crash victims are being harassed.
We are taking these allegations seriously. We are investigating with our team on the ground and with the Iranian authority.
It's still not known how many of the 57 Canadians killed in that crash also held Iranian citizenship. After weeks of speculation, former Quebec Premier Jean Charest says he will not run for the leadership of the federal Conservative Party. Charest announced his decision in an interview with Radio-Canada, saying there just isn't enough time to recruit members and organize his campaign under the current rules of the leadership race. Charest was leader of the Progressive Conservative Party of Canada for 5 years in the 1990s. And up next on The National.
Playing in the NHL would be a big accomplishment because my dream since I was a little boy.
Parents spend a lot to make that dream come true, but are they going too far? Plus, Larry Walker gets the call to the Baseball Hall of Fame. The Canadian slugger's reaction moments after he made history tonight. We will be right back. The NHL All-Star Game is on this weekend. It's a showcase for the best players in the league, best in the world, really. But how did they get to be that good? Talent, yes. Hard work, of course. But it also probably took a lot of money. And Aaron Saltzman shows us how parents are spending big to give their kids an edge.
It's exam week, but these students are heading to the rink instead of the classroom, cramming in an intense 90-minute practice, part of the daily routine at the Ontario Hockey Academy, a private school where hockey is part of the curriculum.
Generally after school from 7:25 in the morning till about 11:30. They'll have lunch. We generally skate at 12:30 in the afternoon till 2. They'll go back to school. They'll have their off-ice session, maybe one more academic class, and the day's usually over by about 5 o'clock.
Take a look at the rosters for this year's NHL All-Star Game. Of the 36 North American players named or filling in as replacements, 14 attended private school. That's nearly 40%. A who's who of the best young talent in the league, going to schools that can cost up to $50,000 a year, reinforcing the notion that hockey, especially at its highest levels, is increasingly a sport for those who can afford it.
For generations now, and I don't think that's overstating things, generations we've been talking about the cost of the game.
Author Sean Fitzgerald says it's not just $300 sticks and $1,000 skates.
It's power skating lessons, it's skills development lessons, it's skating on treadmills, it's private coaching, it's all of these things, and it starts from the age of 4.
And for the kids of families who can't pay for all that?
Those children, statistically, don't make it to the NHL anymore.
Will the growing exclusivity mean the next Wayne Gretzky never becomes the great one?
Do you think your parents would have been able to support you through hockey in today's world?
Probably not.
Hockey Canada says it does have programs that are more accessible, but it also says many parents don't need to spend as much as they do.
I think parents need to sometimes take a step back and really look at how much is too much. You don't need to be going to 6 hockey schools in the summer and being on the ice 12 months a year.
At the Ontario Hockey Academy, while some here dream of the big leagues,
playing in the NHL would be a big accomplishment because my dream since I was a little boy.
Others are here just as much for the education.
I want to go into the field of medicine pretty much, right? And I want to be like a radiologist.
Because no matter where you play, it pays to have a backup plan. Aaron Saltzman, CBC News, Cornwall, Ontario.
Up next on The National, with the first confirmed case in North America, what you need to know about a new strain of coronavirus. How contagious is it? And should Canadians be concerned? We ask the doctors next on The National. Welcome back. Here's some other stories making news around the world tonight. Incredible footage out of eastern Spain today showing sea foam flooding the streets of a coastal town. Now, it's a natural phenomena and one that's part of a larger storm that's been battering the region since Sunday. Heavy flooding, strong winds, severe snowfall, all wreaking havoc. At least 4 people have been killed.
Our house is still on fire. Your inaction is fueling the flames by the hour.
Some sharp words from Greta Thunberg at the World Economic Forum. She repeated her warning that not enough is being done to reduce carbon emissions. And she said planting trees won't cut it. An apparent rebuke to President Donald Trump, who said the U.S. would join an initiative to plant 1 trillion trees. British rocker Ozzy Osbourne has revealed he has Parkinson's disease. The former Black Sabbath frontman had previously denied having the condition, but now says he wants to be open with his fans. There is no cure for the progressive neurodegenerative disorder, but medication can ease the symptoms. Well, tonight on The National, we are tracking the coronavirus that has killed at least 9 people, infected at least 440, and that's now crossed an ocean, the first confirmed case in North America. It's a case near Seattle, someone who'd recently been to China. Now, the patient is doing okay, and now an appeal for calm.
This is certainly not a moment for panic or high anxiety. It is a moment for vigilance.
Now, this strain of coronavirus has similarities to SARS, which killed nearly 800 people around the world back in the early 2000s. This latest virus first broke out in the central Chinese city of Wuhan on New Year's Eve. Then it spread to Beijing, Shanghai, Shenzhen, then jumped to other countries, Thailand, Japan, South Korea, and now down south, Washington State. Airports in countries around the world, including Canada, are implementing measures to identify possible cases. So look, at this early stage in the game, we thought we should call in some reinforcements to help understand what exactly the world is up against here. So let me introduce them. Dr. Danielle Martin is a family physician and chief medical officer at Women's College Hospital. Dr. Isaac Bogosh is an infectious disease specialist at the Toronto General Hospital Research Institute. And Dr. Alison McGeer, a clinical scientist with the Sinai Health System. She was on the front lines of the SARS outbreak in Toronto back in 2003. Welcome to all of you. Dr. Bogosh, maybe I'll start with you. The fact that There is a confirmed case now, down south, Washington State. What do you make of that?
I think that's a really important point in the evolution of this epidemic, because what it shows is that this virus can certainly move from China to other international destinations, but also international destinations that aren't major Asian centers, and it's hitting a little bit closer to home.
Is it at all surprising that it's come here this quickly?
Not really. I mean, many of us who've been following this closely have suspected that the burden of disease in China is a lot larger than the number of reported cases. And we know when there's a large burden of illness in a country, the probability that someone can get on a plane and land somewhere far away goes up.
But Dr. McGeer, I mean, this idea that the actual number of illnesses may be larger than the reported cases, could that be true here as well in the United States? In Canada, we're talking about one confirmed case. Do you suspect there may be many more than that?
I don't think there's many more. I think it's not impossible that there might have been arrivals from China. You know, this clearly started in China, so it's not something that's arising in multiple places around the world. So there might have been one or two other travelers who had mild illness that was undetected. Not impossible. There's not lots of cases, though.
We'll talk about how this all evolves in a moment. But first, I want to get just some basics out of the way. So, Dr. Martin, let's say I get infected. What does that look like?
Well, we think that very often, unfortunately, at this time of year, it might look like lots of other viruses that we see hanging around in our family medicine offices and emergency departments. So cough, fever, shortness of breath. But of course, a person who hasn't traveled to China in the last 14 days, at this point, we don't have reason to suspect is likely to be infected with this coronavirus. You know, it's much more likely that you contracted something from, that your kid picked up in the schoolyard, and so common things being common, that's what we would suspect first.
So is there any more reason to seek out medical attention, to go see a doctor if you do have some of these kind of flu-like symptoms?
If you have traveled to China in the last few weeks, then absolutely, and I would suggest if that's the case that you might want to contact your primary care office ahead of time and let them know that that's the case so that they can make appropriate arrangements, make sure that you get isolated, make sure that they can, do the proper testing, et cetera. If you haven't traveled to China in the last 2 weeks and you've got what feels like a common cold to you, it's still probably the common cold.
Do we know how contagious this strain of coronavirus?
Yeah, that's one of the big questions that is facing the medical and scientific community now. So we know that some people have severe illness, but we're not entirely sure what the denominator is. We don't actually know how many people are walking around that have perhaps a mild infection that just aren't coming to medical attention. So the degree of efficiency for human-to-human transmission is still unknown.
Can we treat it? Is there a cure, a vaccine, any of that?
No, but that's not different, in fact, from most viral infections. With most viral infections, we can support you until your immune system does the job by itself. And in the great majority of people with a viral infection, that will clear it all by themselves. Sometimes they need, extra IV fluids. Sometimes you can get complicating bacterial pneumonias and need antibiotics. So there's supportive treatment, but this isn't different from many other viruses, and that there's not a specific treatment for it.
There's been a lot said about the parallels between this strain of coronavirus and SARS, which is also a type of coronavirus, and which many Torontonians, many Canadians will be intimately familiar with, and maybe induces a little bit of anxiety at the same time. In what ways are these two viruses actually similar, and maybe more importantly, in what ways are they different?
Well, another way to ask the question, I think, is, in what ways are our health care systems and our global sort of response systems similar and different? So, as we've said, this is a virus. It's a virus that has some similarities. We don't know how virulent it is or how frequently people are likely to get really very life-threateningly sick from this virus. But we should remember that, people in Canada die every year at this time of year from influenza, another virus that, so a lot of how serious a virus is depends not just on the virus itself, but on the host, on the person, how frail they are, what other kinds of illnesses they have. But our systems are much better organized now than they were in 2003. If you just look at the global response to this virus, I think we're in much better shape. I certainly hope we're in much better shape than we were in 2003 to respond to that.
In a concrete sense, what has changed? I mean, what have we learned since that SARS outbreak?
Well, there's been a number of major changes. So for starters, just the technology is significantly better. I mean, we only heard of an evolving epidemic about 3 weeks ago. And already this virus, the genetic sequence, has been made publicly available to the world in such a short amount of time. So the technology for diagnostics is certainly a lot better. And then the systems for communication between different levels of government is significantly improved. And then systems within the hospital to care for individuals is significantly improved as well since the SARS epidemic. So in a concrete way, if a patient comes in to a hospital with signs or symptoms suggestive of an infection, even if it is or isn't this coronavirus, if it's any transmissible infection through respiratory route, patients are treated in a manner where there's a minimal risk for transmission of this infection to other healthcare providers or others in the hospital.
And hospitals are taking concrete steps today?
Oh, 100%. 100% they are. Yeah. There's been lots of notifications within the hospital, especially in the emergency department, where the rubber hits the road, for patients to be certainly isolated if they have a respiratory illness, but not only that, identified if they've had recent travel within a couple of weeks to China.
Who's most vulnerable? Because when you look at, and again, I'm thinking of parallels with SARS, right? The fatality rate for SARS was about 10%, but if you break it down by age group, it varies widely, right? From older people to younger people. So what do we know about this particular virus?
Well, I think, that range in case fatality is a general truth about infectious diseases. But you're right, it does make it very difficult to assess now what an overall case fatality rate looks like, because almost certainly the cases are biased towards people who are older and more ill, and it's very likely that younger people and children are much less severely affected. But you just need a big enough accumulation of cases. I know that 300 sounds like a lot of cases, but in terms of assessing the case fatality rate, it's just not enough, right, to really say something sensible about it.
So
I think the other important thing for those of us who are healthcare workers in SARS was that one of the things that was very distinctive about SARS was that people were most infectious when they were very, very ill. So transmission in hospital was a very high risk. So far, this virus looks different. There does appear to have been some transmission in hospitals, but when you consider how many cases there are, next to none.
What is the biggest question mark at this point? What's the biggest sort of outstanding question?
I want to know what the source is, as I think the rest of the world does. It would be very interesting and helpful to know what non-human animal was harboring this infection before it moved into human hosts. And I think the second big question on most people's minds is, what is the degree of transmission and what is the efficiency of transmission from person to person? Because that factor will really be driving this epidemic and will really, if it is not that efficiently transmitted, I think we'll be able to curb this much quicker.
To the three of you, thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Thank you.
Well, in other news, Canada has a new Baseball Hall of Famer tonight. And moments after that, Larry Walker spoke with us about his dream come true. That's next.
I'm calling to let you know that you did not fall short this time.
Larry Walker gets the call from the Hall. The kid from Maple Ridge, BC, becomes just the second Canadian to get into the Baseball Hall of Fame, joining pitching great Ferguson Jenkins. Walker played 17 years in the majors, starting his career with the Montreal Expos. He won 3 batting titles, 9 Gold Glove awards, and was the 1997 MVP. But with all that, there was always an asterisk. He played the bulk of his career in Denver, where the elevation is higher, the air thinner, the ball flies farther, but Hall of Fame voters have spoken. His skill speaks for itself. And hey, we've got Larry Walker joining us right now from West Palm Beach, Florida. First of all, congratulations, sir. How does it feel?
Thank you. It's amazing. Just on cloud 9 right now. I appreciate it.
How did you sleep last night, and how are you going to sleep tonight?
Well, I was saying earlier, I slept great last night. I got some friends in town. Stayed up, paying a little tribute to Rush last night. So we stayed up till about 3 in the morning, just hanging out, listening to Rush and watching videos.
How much does this, your induction into the Hall of Fame, mean to you?
Well, it's what every kid, I guess, dreams about. You know, you dream about hitting that home run maybe in Game 7 to walk it off and win a World Series, and then when it's all over and the career's over and the numbers are there, then the next dream is, okay, was I good enough to go join the greats of the game? So somehow or another, I pulled that off, and you know, so the writers thought I was just good enough to make it in. So I'm thrilled about the honor and thrilled about going in as a Canadian.
Well, you pulled it off and down to the wire, I might add. I mean, it had to happen this year or perhaps not at all. The fact that it took this long, what do you make of that?
I have no issues with that. I think it's year 1, year 10, I'm good as long as you get in, all right? I guess that's why they give you 10 years.
Okay, so there is a bigger picture to this, of course. You know, other Canadians, other ball players following in your footsteps. What do you hope that your induction accomplishes?
Well, I think with Canadian baseball, even in the last 2 decades, from when I first started in the major leagues back in 1989, I think a lot has come forward from there. A lot of players have just come out and played at a level that we're not used to seeing. We could actually put together a Major League Baseball all-star team and compete with anybody. You know, before it was a handful here or there, but there's so much talent now coming north of the border, and it's a joy to watch and a very, very prideful thing to see.
Well, Larry Walker, I hope you get some sleep tonight. Not sure that you will, but congratulations once again. Pleasure to speak with you.
I appreciate it. Thank you guys so much.
Hello again from St. John's. The Moment is up next. Waiting hours in line after being snowbound for days. Well, that is a test of patience, but not for Newfoundlanders. Right after the break. All right, welcome back to St. John's. The city still very much crawling back to life tonight. You can see it here on the streets as people slowly navigate the labyrinth of snowbanks. So tonight we revisit the other challenge in St. John's today. That is finding food. Massive lineups stretched outside grocery stores, people waiting hours to go inside, but still with incredibly good humor, and that is our moment.
I got here this morning at 7:30. People are running out of food all over this city, and even outside of the city. There's moms looking for formulas for their babies.
Whatever I can get my hands on. We have 4 kids, myself and my husband, and we've been snowed in since all of this. This is really the first time we've been able to get out and get anything.
We actually had to go on Facebook and go through the marketplace and try and buy some food off people.
I thought it might be down to the exit over there, but to see it loop all the way through the parking lot is madness. I'm just glad everyone's being nice and civilized, like everything else in Newfoundland.
Everybody needs food. We don't mind being here.
People are armed with patience, so we can tell that everybody's doing the best they can. St. John's proved again that it is a really tight community and everybody kind of helps each other, right?
Staff's doing a fantastic job keeping people moving, and they were giving out water a couple minutes ago. So.
We're Newfoundlanders. How's that? That's all I can say. Newfoundlanders.
And just to emphasize that, earlier this evening on that Facebook page that everyone is passing stuff around, we saw a notice from a woman who had put a card table out on her street, filled it with food, and said, look, come by, grab what you need. If you do need something, I'm going to take it in soon, but I'll bring it back out tomorrow morning. We know the lineups are long, so we're here for you.
Huh. Well, that is incredible to hear. And Adrian, just one more question. Not that I don't enjoy having all this desk space to myself, but are you coming home anytime soon? What's the plan?
You didn't get the note that I live here now?
Oh, is that
we like a lot of people who are trying to get out. There are thousands of Newfoundlanders trying to get out. The airlines, now that the airport is open, are putting some bigger planes on, and so lots of people like us are trying to book flights out maybe tomorrow, so maybe I'll see you tomorrow. I don't know.
Okay, I'll be the first to welcome you home. That's The National for this January 21st. Have a good night.